welcome to the final of our three-part series on exploring Mary's Voice by Dr. Amy Orr Ewing. I'm Diana.
Terri.
And this is Terri, and I'm from a predominantly Anglican background.
I was born and raised as a Catholic.
And we have been Roman Catholic. So we have been exploring this wonderful book, which is Getting to Know Mary, the Mother of Christ. And it's been the first couple of weeks. Oh my goodness, we could have gone on and on, couldn't we, Terri? There were so many little avenues, and we just chat for hours about stuff, have all these aha moments. So last week, we didn't really get the chance to touch on justice. And we're going to today look back at the last week of Advent, the third week, and then we've only got a few days till Christmas. So we're going to cover a lot in a really short space of time. And they're just going to be sort of key highlights that really stood out that we wanted to chat about, or I wanted to chat about with Terri and get her view because of her experience in Catholicism, where Mary's such a huge part of the expression of Christian faith. So I just wanted to open up, and I know I posted this on social. So when I was I made a choice as an adult to stick with Christianity, choose Christ. I didn't really understand Christ, but I chose God and got to know Christ a bit. I always found him quite an intimidating character early on in my faith. But I had an amazing mentor when I was first an adult Christian, and it's from Isaiah, and it goes, "A bruised reed he will not break, a smouldering wick he will not snuff out." And I think we've touched on that briefly, but this is all linked in with this idea of lifting up the humble and seeing justice for the humble. That was really why I just wanted to reiterate it, and just to reiterate that reeds were not thin things, but they were strong pieces of material used to build homes and what have you. And sometimes life can really crush really strong people. I think that was where we kind of landed with that. So that was really the only other bit that we kind of didn't get to really delve into, but I feel like we kind of did. So it's kind of weird, isn't it? That humility we really went to town on.
We did.
Woven in with justice.
Yes. And so picking up on the justice component of it today would be, I think, great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the humility. We also discussed, how it's in today's world, humility, being humble is not the MO. It's not the way that most women and most professionals, especially in the world that I'm in, it's very hard to be humble when you're trying to promote yourself. We live in a highly self-promotional world. Social media is all about, it's our, canvas to go on there and show up. And so the idea of humility in today's world is a hard one. It's a hard concept. A lot of people don't know how to appreciate it and understand it relative to how God is asking us to be.
Mm.
And is calling us to be. So just going right back to the very first podcast that we did on this, it's that grace. And I feel like it's hard to swallow the humble pill and say to yourself, I'm going to allow the goodness of what I am about to speak for itself and not be something that I need to shout from the rooftops and boast about. And, that is, to me, that is a huge question, a huge journey to understand that, to see the power of God's love work through our humility, to wait for the highlight, the spotlight, to wait for the moment where what we're doing matters to someone on a very genuine and meaningful level, not because we've told you it does, and not because we have boasted about it doing that, not because we have taken the spotlight and put it on ourselves, but because God has chosen to allow the goodness of what we've done to communicate and actually connect to other people.
Mm.
I really feel strongly about that. I really feel strongly that in this world of self-promotion that we're sort of, we're all given the plugs to do that, and the prompts to do that, to sit back and allow God to shine the light on us is
There's
what I
some,
really feel is humility.
yeah, there's something in also submission, treasuring things in her heart, which this
Right.
week when I was reading, like Amy gets to all these things. It's like when I was scribbling, like, oh my goodness, like she's come to it. So, so I'm not sure what, honestly, that I can add looking at the book in terms of justice right now, apart from, just to echo what you say. Amy says, I'll just read the one sentence. The rich who believe themselves to be full are found to be empty. The very wealth of our culture tells us to pursue in order to feel happy, safe, and fulfilled ends up leaving us empty, exhausted, and sad. This chimes with experiences of many in our culture. Anxiously acquiring wealth leads to more stress. Actually, I was listening to Manessa Helm, I can't pronounce her name, talking about that very thing. Like the higher your targets, your revenue targets, the bigger the responsibility, the bigger the commitments, the more the stress, and how she had to take a step back and figure out what's going on in her mind and outlook and stuff. But if we come on to the beginning of the week we've just had, I'll just read the quote from Luke again. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised our ancestors. And then Amy talks about Mary closing her song by rooting in everything she's saying up to this point, looking back at the preparation before. And you talked about that, I think, in both of the episodes, and how Mary's declaring her own conviction that the time of waiting is over. Like, can you even imagine that? Like, hearing all of this in your upbringing as a young woman and just getting it, and nowhere does she say in her response, are you sure it's, and this is when we've just been on humility, she just said, no, you can't pick me. Oh no. She just, her openness and willingness. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's a really tough thing for all of us to do. And everyone, even Sarai, we all take it upon ourselves. We're given this message. I think God speaks to us, but so many times we miss that message because our human desires for what we want, our goals, our expectations take over. And when we think about Mary, you're right. Her parents knew that she had to go to the temple. They knew that they had to follow along with what they had been told to do. Mary had to go, and Mary, the whole while, all we know is that Mary honored was here to fulfill the prophecy.
And she accepted it. This is the
She
big thing. She
accepted it.
accepted it.
She accepted it and didn't say, okay, I'm here to fulfill the prophecy, but you know what? I really feel like I want to go and see this. I want to go see Joseph, and I want to talk to Joseph because I feel like Joseph and I are supposed to be together, and I'm not sure that this is going to work out so well. So maybe I should she didn't take anything into her own hands. She never tried to do anything herself. And that is a huge, trust.
It's trust.
Still her
And
voice.
she's believing the promises of God. And when we talked, it was last week, because I remember we got into the whole body, soul, and spirit thing, and that God is talking to us all the time. So to each person God creates, he gives us promises. He gives us promises in scripture, and he gives it to us individually. I know that as a young woman, I heard God. I now know that was God. It was so clear. And when God speaks clearly to you as an individual, it's very easy to doubt it or not trust that voice. I think this is where mentoring and coaching is so, so helpful. Like for me, when I was in a really tough time, and the coach and mentor I had really said, you're hearing God. You are hearing God, when I was describing stuff. Now do what it says on the tin. Like, you hear God. I needed her to say to me, a grown woman, midlife, who's pursuing God for 30 plus years, yes, you hear God. I needed someone. But even Mary had that in Elizabeth, we looked at the other week.
Mhm.
She needed human affirmation that she did hear God. And she was also tucking herself away. Like you say, she didn't go running to Joseph. She tucked herself away. All that we explored about two women's voices, Zacharias having to keep silent. And it's another woman speaking to another woman. And we come on in this, last week and in the run up to Christmas itself, Christmas Day itself, when Zachariah is able to speak and pave the way. And when God speaks, he really does. To you who's listening, I absolutely guarantee that there is a dream that you had that you can't forget. Things that you thought, intuition you overlooked. God is speaking to you all the time and through the works of your hands as well. Like, we're so often asked to find God for our purpose, live purpose-driven lives. Yeah. That's the big clarion call to every believer. Live purpose-driven lives. But we forget or we overlook that God trusts us. He trusted me with my son to raise him here. He trusted me to be able to read, write. I don't know. He's given me skills and abilities. And we know from scripture and our own lived experience, where we are weak, God is strong. But we're not completely weak. We're capable of taking care of ourselves, and we have a responsibility. And in scripture, in the New Testament, I think it's Paul who's writing, getting really frustrated, saying, do you need spiritual milk? You should be on spiritual solids by now. So there's that maturity. But I'll stop there because I know we're really short. We've got lots to get through. Do you want to respond to that at all?
I feel like, we do have a responsibility. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what God has given us and because sometimes what God has given us feels like a curse.
Yeah.
Sometimes what God has given us feels like it is, and so to flip that, like if we've got a child who's struggling with neurodivergent, neurodivergence or some form of a disability or
Just 1 second. We're going to have to pause 1 second. So, folks, I just had to pause and I'll probably edit it out because we just on cue when we're talking.
No, I just think it sometimes feels like a curse. It can feel like a curse when the things that you're struggling with are actually given to you because the Lord knows that you can handle it.
Oh, I find that so hard because then we sort of move it into trauma land.
I
What
know.
doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, it doesn't. It causes a whole load of physical and emotional dysregulation.
Okay, so let's talk about that for 2 seconds, okay? Because I think that would be really important and interesting for our listeners, I think, just to connect what Mary has taught us to today's world, okay? The idea that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger is not the same message as the Lord has given you something because he knows that you have it in your heart to handle it. I believe there's a difference in that. And I'm going to use an example, okay? My dog is a rescue.
Mm-hmm.
He is, I adopted him when he was like 3 months old. He immediately demonstrated that he had genetically driven issues. Okay. It wasn't like, I know the whole, your energy matters. It's all about you. I get it. But this dog, I got him and I was love and light and everything was great. And he wanted to attack other dogs and he was not good around children and not good around. So he's got issues and he has had issues for 9 years. And I have worked and I have done everything I can to get those issues out of him. But he's always going to have those issues. Okay. And for me to take the chances with other children or other dogs and risk him hurting someone, another being, I've learned that that's not worth it. You just don't do that. And that means that, the last 9 years of my life, relationships, childbearing, all of those things have kind of been put on a back burner. And I know that sounds crazy to some listeners, but because I love this dog so much and because I felt like I adopted this dog and he's my responsibility, I have kind of put things on the back burner to make things okay for this dog. There are moments where I don't understand. Like, I would give anything to have this little dog that everybody can walk in and kids can hang off of and kiss, and like it's not a possibility. But I know that if I think about it, I've always been the person who wanted to help those who were not wanted. And when I adopted him, the woman who I adopted him from, the foster mom, said to me, "No one wants him." And I don't know why, but those words drew me to him. And I think that God knows that my heart works that way. And even though it's painful, because the lifestyle that I have is not perfect, I don't get to do some of the things that I would love to be able to do with my dog and share with my dog. I know that voice, that message is in my head, and it becomes a bit of a vocation. And I've allowed myself to see that God knows my heart. So God doesn't give us anything we cannot handle. God knows my heart. And I've had to really, really talk with God about that and be okay with that. So I'm just, trauma is definitely something we can get stuck in. And abuse is something we cannot stay in abusive, traumatic situations. But where life does not become what we expected it to be, where life lets us down, or where we're not living up to what we thought, and we have all these roadblocks in the way, sometimes I find comfort in understanding that I do pray to a God who sees me. Like Hagar, I believe that there is a God who sees me and knows my heart. And that the beauty that comes from me having this dog in my life that I could not have signed up for, I would never have said, "Yes, please give me the most difficult dog on the face of the planet." I've chosen to see it as, oh, right, you chose this, Terri, and this was put in your path because this is the way your heart works. Trust it. Now, I'm putting that out there. I'm sure I have a lot of people listening to me, or people, if anyone's listening to me right now, I'm sure they're saying, "Oh my gosh, get rid of the dog," but I think of that as a similar experience. What do you think of that? Just to close on the trauma point, because I think it's
I
important.
think that's really multi-layered.
Yeah.
I think that's really multi-layered because there was an element of your choice within that. And you've touched on it also previously, when things happen to you that isn't your choice, is more what I'm thinking. A
The
bereavement.
unexpected, the
Yeah.
grace to accept the unexpected.
Expected. Like bereavement is what immediately comes to mind. Being caught in the middle of bombing. Just there's so much where it's not your choice, and other people's bad choices then have an impact on you as well. It's so many,
I know.
so many layers.
It's so many layers. Yeah.
And I love that. I know I'd pray to a God who I know sees my heart. And I think that's key. He sees, like, really believing that and really knowing that you're seen is massive. It's one thing to think it, it's another thing to
To
feel it.
feel it. To feel it. And I think that Mary is a great example of someone who believed that God knew her heart. And when she collects all the things that are not in her life, peace, light, and gathers them in her heart, collects them in her heart, and ponders them with God, that's a safe space to actually have what you are missing, and to know and to actually enjoy what you might be missing, in the pondering of it, in the loving of it, in the understanding that that's what they're here for, that you want. It's a gentleness and it's a trust, and I think if any woman has ever experienced what it's like to let go and let God and let that actually happen, it's never what you expect. It's not like, oh, I let go and let God and now I'm a millionaire, or I let go and let God and I found the man of my dreams, or, it's I let go and let God and I accept the unexpected that I know and trust he's going to give to me with love. I say this knowing how hard that is.
Yeah. I really want to almost go off piece now and explore Hagar within all of that, but we can do that
We're going to do
season
that. We're going to
one
have
next year.
a whole
Okay.
Hagar episode.
Back onto Mary, and she does Amy does talk about the Immaculate Conception here in terms of the Holy Spirit caused Mary's egg to be fertilized so that the child was fully human as well as fully God. Honestly, in my faith, I've never really struggled with that.
Okay.
I've just never struggled, given what people can do to create other people, genetic, all of that. I've just never struggled with that. And I know that people do. And like, sort of entertainment narratives will come up around that. And she sort of midway through the week we've just had, it's not sort of chronological this week we've just had. So Amy touches on the conception. She also touches on the birth. And then she kind of goes back to Joseph and the meaning and his role in protecting Mary through the dream, and talking about Bethlehem. The name Bethlehem means the house of bread. And then later Jesus talks about himself being about the bread of life. And again, just this repeated narrative through the whole of this last week about Jesus wasn't just born in a moment of time. He's a fulfillment of an ultimate hope, a longing that God would come in history, and it unfolds in this unique and specific way. And it keeps going back to the book of Isaiah. Honestly, that's one of my favorite books. Like, if you're going to read one or two books, like, read Isaiah and I think Matthew to really understand some of the book of Matthew in the Gospels, because those two books together will really help you see the fulfillment and understand a bit about the cultural context for yourself without having to read around it.
I'm going to do that. Thank you for those. That is really great. Book of Isaiah and Book of Matthew. Do you know that I have never read those front to back? And so thank you.
It's very poetical, Isaiah, very poetical, but it's so like, oh, look, when you know Jesus and who he's the fulfillment of.
Okay.
And then Mary, and then Amy talks about our favorite bit, but Mary treasured up these things and pondered them in her heart. And I think we keep coming back to this pondering. And she's also aware, and we just at the beginning of the episode we talked about this, that she understood the magnitude of all of this history, and that she is or was a witness to the fulfillment of this promise. And then Amy goes on to talk about after Jesus's birth. So as I say, that the last week and in the run up to Jesus's birth, it's woven like this, but it's woven so beautifully. Like, Amy reflects forwards and backwards over the last week and right up to Christmas Day, and talks about Mary and Joseph going and presenting the 8-day-old baby Jesus, to the temple, and how Simeon, who was so witness, there was a lot of injustice and oppression going on. And actually, as I'm talking, I know we're sort of packing lots in, Mary seeing this long fulfillment. It wasn't just in this moment, and all the other people involved in this story. And we've got Anna and Simeon, they were prepared. We've got his cousin that's being bored to lay the immediate way. And Amy talks about when Zachariah gets his voice back, and the first thing he says is he prophesies over his own son about paving the way, as a prophet, paving the way for Jesus. It's not just Jesus, some person at age 30 that starts talking, hey, I'm the Messiah. Like all these people, this woven story, and we get an element of that at Christmas with the nativity. But when we hear God's word preached, it's usually an individual
Mhm.
that we're hearing about, and that maybe their experience of Jesus, if we're looking in the Gospels, or it's a moment. It's these tiny snapshots of somebody's life, but it is such a it's I'm going to use the tapestry thing. I'm going to do it. Like it's something that's woven. This fabric of Jesus's life is woven since way back, woven, and it's woven. And behind, there's all this great big mishmash behind the scenes stuff that I think Amy brings out in the last week and in the run up to it. And very, very briefly, Amy mentions Herod, the megalomaniac, his frustration, the star, the fact that he realizes that they're not coming back, the slaughter of the innocents, and how we have the dream and the escape. They actually go to Egypt. I think there's probably a lot of symbolism in that, and then it's safe to come back, and I think it's Nazareth they come back to. Anyway, they move around a lot in his life before he's 30. And when you read Isaiah, it is all in there. The places he's lived, the place the Messiah lives. And yet the life, before
Yeah,
he's 30, it's all reactions to political safety at the time, or where he's born, the census, what have you. I just want to quickly get up, and then it's kind of like when we get to Christmas Day, the quote is Luke. She gives birth to her newborn, and it's and that we celebrate as Christians all around the world. Some people do celebrate on Christmas Eve. Let's acknowledge that, and that as we focus on the arrival of the Messiah, not to skip over the wonder of Mary's truth and the account she has given. If we think, like, just reading here, Mary's account includes little details that matter greatly. She wrapped her baby in swaddling clothes and placed him in a manger. We may have idealized the view of a manger from store windows, etc. But Mary was not home in Nazareth. She and Joseph had traveled to Bethlehem for tax census. The place where they stayed did not have a separate room. They find themselves needing a manger for the baby to sleep in. Just like, I mean, you've talked about this, she didn't take anything into her own hands. It's almost like she's being tossed around by external things all the way through this. And she's giving birth around in a really unhygienic place without women around her.
I know. It's a very interesting. There's so many different levels of understanding the complexities of what she went through, and how there were so many opportunities for her to fall and not honor what was coming her way. And she did, thank God. She did. So that is, I mean, it really is, it's a hard thing for a woman to hear, especially if you've not experienced a relationship with Christ, but being able to allow yourself to hear and trust, even in the most hard to understand circumstances, um, yeah, it's a tough one, and it really calls me to relax. It calls me to take pause. It calls for me to want to be quiet and silent and to ponder, and not to create or plan or strategize. There's a lot there that is so counterintuitive to what we want to do as human beings and what our world continuously progressively tries to tell us to do. So taking that pause and trusting under those circumstances is so very important.
Yeah, and I was just about to say that's a perfect place to stop, to invite people to pause, ponder, and really consider for yourselves to get your own copy of Mary's Voice, because we've said all the way through this series, this isn't just for Christmas. Just as a woman, as we really have skated across the surface of the last just over 3 weeks. Yeah. So thank you, Terri, and thank you for joining us on our toe dipping in the water of exploration of women in the Bible and what we can learn about their character and how we can practice that in our own lives. So thank you.
Together, two by two.
2 by 2. Bye for now.
Bye, Diana. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.